It was the summer of 2010. Tourists in Cape Town were enjoying the city's holiday atmosphere and sights, from the coast to the cafes and the city's legendary drives. It was a scene appreciated by brothers James and Daniel Clarence. The brothers are from Johannesburg, and almost typically they were pursuing a dream to start their own business in South Africa's playground city. A dream that was born in Thailand.
Loved every second of being in a tuk-tuk, how it could get you from your hotel to the beach, to a restaurant, to wherever you wanted to go. It was fun, it was enjoyable.
They'd identified what they saw as a gap in the public transport sector, affordable door-to-door transport. They thought tuk-tuks would work in Cape Town, and 3 years later started a company in the city.
We hit the road 7 days a week. We hit from 9 in the morning till most days till 1 a.m, providing Cape Town with an alternative form of transport.
Up in Johannesburg, public transport consultant Paul Browning says it was an opportunity waiting to happen.
The tuk-tuks are a wonderful example of enterprise. There's a gap in the market and they intend to try and fill that gap.
It might sound like a metered taxi, but as James explains, from their shared little office in Sea Point, it's more affordable. And most importantly, there's a demand for it.
The reception that we've had in the close on 6 months that we've been operating has proven that.
It's been even more popular in Johannesburg, as explained by Dean Liversage, who runs a tuk-tuk operation in Johannesburg's Parkview Melville area.
Over here, the demand is absolutely incredible. We can't even fill 60% of the demand of calls that we get, from kids going to school to grannies going shopping and everyone in between.
The tuk-tuks are clearly going to be competition from the metered taxis in a place like Sandton, where we are now. The metered taxi charges probably 12 rands a kilometre. The tuk-tuks are charging only 5 rands a kilometre.
Can I ask you a question? What do you think of my taxi?
I think of your taxi. Can you ask opposition?
No, I'm
Can you
asking.
ask opposition what you like?
While tuk-tuks are new to South African roads, what has really caught the public's attention is the Clarence brothers' innovative business model. It even caught the eye of Western Cape Transport MEC Robin Carlyle.
Listen, I think it's one of the cutest ideas I've ever heard of. Okay, I think it's a marvellous idea.
Passengers sign a form saying they're buying shares when they get a ride. So the brothers' argument is that they aren't a public transport company, but rather a private transport operation, providing company transport to their shareholders.
Unfortunately, it's against the law, because what's to stop anybody else doing that?
No, I would say absolutely not. We say we've entered into the private transport industry. We're not in the public transport industry.
While their business model has made national headlines, Carlisle's counterpart in the city of Cape Town, Brett Heron, says the tuk-tuks simply don't fit in with the city's integrated public transport plan.
We have an integrated transport plan which is about 5 years old. We're in the process of reworking that plan with a new vision, and in the new plan we will make provision for a tuk-tuk service. But when these applications came to the province and they were sent to the city for a comment, they were not provided for in our plan, and we didn't want to respond on an ad hoc basis to applications like these.
Our viewpoint is that we fit within Section 53, the exemptions of our operating licence.
I understand that they have an idea that this is not a public transport service, but a service to their shareholders, people who buy shares. But our understanding of the service is that it's open to any member of the public who pays a fee and they get a journey.
The fact is, at the end of the day, they're a public transport outfit who don't want to conform to the regulations for public transport.
It's almost a case of the big boys against the little guys. Despite all the talk of integrated plans, Paul Browning says it's hard to stop the inevitable.
Our transport planning is admirable, but it's long-term. What happens when something like the tuk-tuk suddenly appears on the scene? And there's clearly a potential public demand for it.
But to find out how their business came to be illegal, we have to go back to the beginning. It was 2 years after the brothers had returned to Johannesburg from Thailand. While they both had jobs, Daniel had started the process of applying for licenses. It was an entrepreneur's nightmare and the beginning of a quarrel with the Western Cape and Cape Town governments.
I believe they were dishonest on a fair few occasions. I've got that in writing that I'd applied for 8 licenses. Then they give me a piece of paper and it says that it's only for 1 license. So how am I going to sort this out? You got to go through the process again. Will there be an issue? No, provided no one objects against it in the government gazette, then you're going to be all good. You're going to get your licenses.
As can be seen in his email conversation with the Western Cape Department of Transport, Daniel says he was led to believe that in the absence of objections, the licenses would be granted. It was at this point that Daniel packed up his Johannesburg life and moved to Cape Town, soon to be followed by his brother.
You know, you make life-changing decisions at that point in time, and to only later then be told, sorry, this is actually not the case. It's a difficult pill to swallow.
The brothers had rented office space on the top floor of a Sea Point office block, and in the process of getting the company up and running, spent a lot of money.
We sold movable assets, we resigned from jobs, we invested a fair amount of money. At Tuk Tuk, these retail at around 34,000, so it's not hard to calculate what's been spent on an operation like this.
And that's not mentioning the 6,300 rands they were charged by the Western Cape government for the remaining 9 license applications. But if the city's Brett Heron says there was no provision made for tuk-tuks when the brothers applied, why were their applications and money accepted?
I think transparency is a big issue. If they had been upfront from day one and said, this can't be done, I would have probably just palmed it off and said, okay, cool, good idea, I'll try something else.
Meanwhile, the Clarence brothers were told by provincial government that they would have to appeal to the National Department of Transport's Appeals Tribunal if they wish to pursue their case. The only problem is that the tribunal was, and still is, apparently not functioning.
You know, you got to a point where, one, we either give up on this thing and throw in the towel and say, well, look, it was a great idea. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we weren't given that option.
It was late last year. The Clarence brothers were sitting with 20 tuk-tuks from India, and the December holidays were about to begin, which the brothers knew meant loads of potential business.
We'd done too much. We had invested too much money. We had invested time. We had done what we can, and we had to get smart, trying to figure out a way of how to legally operate.
And so, with lawyers, the Clarence brothers came up with a plan to make passengers temporary shareholders. They believe they're on a strong legal footing.
Courts is a costly affair. If take the financial aspect out of this equation, I think we have an extremely strong case, yes.
But if James thought MEC Carlisle had fired his best warning shots, he'd be wrong. The taxi industry is a favourite topic for the MEC. He says unless carefully handled, the instability of the recent taxi past could be repeated in an emerging tuk-tuk sector.
My problem is, when will I expect to see taxis travelling on routes that belong to other taxis, okay, and saying, I'm not public transport, I'm selling you shares in, my taxi business. You see, I mean, the point is, where does it stop?
On the subject of competing for routes, the brothers said they've thus far experienced no problems with taxis. And when we took to the streets, it was hard enough to find an angry look, let alone a harsh word.
It's nice and cool, but as long as it's not going to take our business, it's all right.
In Johannesburg, Dean Liversedge says he too hasn't experienced any problems with the taxis.
We're very lucky in the sense that we haven't had any conflict whatsoever with either meter taxis or with the minibus taxis. We get along with them really well.
Although, on a sober note, analyst Paul Browning says that in the long term, the tuk-tuks could nevertheless still provide competition for minibus taxis.
We've seen what has happened in the past. It seems very important that the authorities should act now to try and make sure that that kind of conflict does not arise.
Johannesburg tuk-tuk operations are already legal, and the city of Cape Town's Brett Heron has confirmed that the city will soon enough have its own. With 80 license applications already submitted and the authorities ignoring the brothers' argument, it means Daniel and James Clarence have lost the initiative they seized, but they're not giving up.
I've applied in my personal capacity. I've applied again as the Monarch Taxi Company. I'm in the process of applying for a national license, and I've got my third process in.